Welcome back to Garden Talk, brought to you by the Penn State Erie County Extension Master Gardeners. I'm your co-host for today, Mike Bailey, along with Ellen DePlacido. Ellen, good afternoon.
Yes, it's new, isn't it?
Yes,
Good
right.
afternoon.
We've been morning for the most part, and then we did evening, and now we're in the
Uh-huh.
afternoon. Okay,
Yeah,
this
yeah,
summertime schedules, okay, are
yeah.
different. So we're going to finish up our discussion on composting today, aren't we?
That's right.
We hope. We hope. We hope.
We
And
hope,
last
yes.
time we talked about you know composting materials from the kitchen.
The kitchen.
And I would review some of that, but instead of reviewing that, what I want to tell you is that all of the programs are now available on the Erie County Library website. You
Mm-hmm.
go to Erie County, PA Library, and then you go to resources, and then you
Mm-hmm.
simply click on seed saving / garden info. And Ellen and I will appear in front of you.
Oh,
And then you could
so exciting.
then you can select whatever program that you'd like to listen to. All of them. This is today's number 55. We're starting 55 today,
Mm-hmm.
and but they're all there. You can go back and listen to the one on kitchen composting if you would like, if you need some reminders about that. But in regards to the garden and yard composting materials, we probably need to say a few general comments, okay, before we get started on a
Okay.
little bit more of the detail.
Okay.
Like, first of all, the plastic bins and tumblers are really not made for the yard and garden waste material unless you're dealing with a really relatively small amount of material. There's just too much, at least from the gardens that we deal
Right.
with. I mean, we get mounds, okay?
Mm-hmm.
A basic pile or bin with an open front, and maybe a series of them probably would work out really well. And it facilitates, turning and shutting down one pile and going to the next, so you can transition from one cycle of composting to another. And the other thing is spoiled fruit and vegetables from the garden, and we all have some of them. Uh,
No, we don't.
Yes, we do. And they probably should be placed in some kind of a separate container, like maybe your
Mm-hmm.
kitchen material composter, or maybe in a separate container. And what we use at Emmaus, we have a garbage can, a plastic garbage can that we have drilled holes in the bottom of it and a couple inches on the sides, eighth of an inch holes, and we have a lid for that we secure with a brick. Okay, and we'll put any kind of bad
Spoiled.
fruit,
Mm-hmm.
spoiled
Mm-hmm.
fruit or vegetables in that to keep the rodents away and
Mm-hmm.
out of your compost pile. And that's very important to do that. Um, so that, and keep in mind that sun and rain are really helpful when it comes down to this composting process. Uh, and the other thing is that literature talks about some kind of a ratio of 30 times as much carbon material or the dark or brown material, okay, than the green material or the nitrogen based material. But that's going to vary from season to season, for you, just like it does for us. I don't pay real close attention to that. I don't agonize over that craziness, because it's not craziness, but you got to be reasonable about this whole approach. Okay, like we said
Right.
before, Mother Nature has been breaking down material, for a long,
Mm-hmm.
long time,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and you
And
know,
you really don't want to make it any harder than
yeah,
you have to.
thank you.
Yes.
Okay, and
Yes.
but just like kitchen materials, okay, you don't really need these commercial additives. They're really not
Mm-hmm.
necessary. I throw in a couple of handfuls of garden soil, into the compost pile, okay, and that contains enough decomposers, okay, to help with the whole process. So,
Okay.
but what about what
Mm.
kinds of materials might you put in this yard compost system, if you will, Ellen?
And I think that's what's important to keep in mind. It's what do you really want to put into your compost pile? Remember, plant material that has a lot of seeds, that's going to require higher temperatures to kill those seeds so that you're not spreading whatever you're trying to put in the compost where you don't want that material to be.
That's a good point.
And yeah, and for the most part, plants with pests and diseases really aren't a problem, but there's couple exceptions, and that's the late blight on your tomatoes and potatoes. You probably don't want to put those, or you don't definitely want to put those in your compost pile. Either burn them or bag them and send them to a landfill. Grass clippings from lawns that are treated with herbicides or insecticides don't break down very quickly. So you should be careful if you're going to use that in a compost pile in a vegetable garden. Um, it's just not probably a good idea. Definitely, we talked about this before. No pet food or waste like meat or grease. Don't ever put that into your compost pile. But coffee grounds and eggshells and shredded paper are actually good to add. That's a good substance to put into a compost pile. So,
So can I add a few things, Ellen, please?
yeah,
Okay.
sure.
First of all, in reverse order here, shredded paper. I have a
Mm-hmm.
paper shredder here at home, for
Mm-hmm.
all the quote unquote sensitive material that we get in the mail, and stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that and other things. I I take that shredded paper. Now I use that in the compost pile, and
Mm-hmm.
occasionally I'll go out there with a bag full and I'll sprinkle it in periodically, et cetera, and stuff like that, and that works out really well. The
Mm-hmm.
other thing I want to go back to is this whole thing about the grass clippings
Mm,
from treated lawns. Okay, now
right.
it just so happens that our postman is a gardener. Okay, and he knows that I do some gardening also. So he stops sometimes and delivers more than just mail. Okay, we chit chat about
Chit chat.
we chit
Yeah.
chat about the garden, and he told me that and he's very good gardener, but he
Mm-hmm.
told me this year he's having problems with his tomatoes, and
Oh.
yeah, and he says they're getting this curly top and the leaves or something. And I go, well, it can either be, cultural things like, water and fertilizer, or it can be,
Mm-hmm.
some kind of a virus, or it can be an herbicide, okay, contamination. And he goes, well, I go, he says, well, what I do is I make my compost. Yeah, I said, what'd you put in your compost? He says, I put all my
Mm-hmm.
grass clippings. I says, well, do you have a lawn service? Oh, yes, we do. In fact, last year, he says, but I've always used it. But last year they changed the product, changed the mix a little bit, put a little bit of a different, component in there because he was having trouble with a certain weed. So he
Uh-huh.
said, that
Oh.
is probably the source. So what he did, and it was
Mm-hmm.
very smart on his part, he took some of that compost from his compost pile and started some new seeds. And they grew really well initially. Then they developed the
Oh.
same kind of process.
He's
So
pretty smart, isn't
yes,
he?
he is. And that's the same thing with the weeds. When you're concerned about weeds, take some of that
Uh-huh.
compost, put it in a pot and water it like you would, and see whether you get a lot of seed germination out of there. Okay, that'll give you a
Okay.
good idea whether or not it's cooked far enough. So, Ellen, we've gone past our time. Sorry, Brian.
Okay.
Okay, little shout
That's
out to
okay.
Brian, our mentor. Okay, and so we're going to pick up on this during the next program. Thank you now.
Mm-hmm.